Доброго времени суток всем, дамы и господа. Сегодня мы начинаем, точнее даже продолжаем наши мастер-классы с нашими зарубежными кинематографистами, продюсерами, преподавателями. Меня зовут Евгений, я являюсь специалистом приемной комиссии школы индустрии. Сегодня я буду, так сказать, открывать и закрывать наш мастер-класс. Вот. В данном случае хотелось бы еще раз повторить, наверное, для тех, кто слышал, может быть, или не слышал про школу индустрии, то есть это новое веяние в обучении в кинематографе у нас в России, где основателем является Федор Бондарчук, это продюсер Александр Андрющенко и Михаил Врубель, кинокомпания «Водород», вот, и также под патронажем национальной медиагруппы. Вот. В данном случае хотелось бы, пока что у нас идет небольшая такая подготовка с нашим спикером, рассказать про то обучение, которое мы предоставляем. То есть сейчас ведется активно весенний набор на многие направления, как и очно, так и онлайн, на очные направления. То есть это менеджмент в музыкальном бизнесе, и менеджмент артистов в кино, звукорежиссура, режиссура монтажа, VFX, второй режиссер и так далее. Со всем перечнем вы можете ознакомиться у нас на сайте. Также мы год готовили онлайн программы, которые достаточно очень крепкие в плане своей информативности и дальнейшего развития студентов. То есть мы предоставляем огромное количество стажировок, таких направлений, как сценарное мастерство, режиссура, продюсирование, режиссура монтажа. То есть это основной костяк наших программ, которые как бы достаточно пользуются популярностью. Вот. Возвращаясь к нашим мастер-классам, мастер-классы будут проводиться каждую пятницу, примерно в одно и то же время. Расписание вы сможете увидеть также на лендинге по вебинарам. Вот. И хотелось бы как раз-таки сегодня, наверное, рассказать вам о нашем спикере. Эта программа будет Proof of Concept, будет вести ее продюсер и режиссер Джастин Ларо. Он является преподавателем Нью-Йоркской Академии кино. Вот. Он спродюсировал фильмы такие, как «No Альтернатив», как бы с достаточно высоким рейтингом под 83%, и работал на съемочной площадке фильма «128 ударов сердца в минуту». Вот. Расскажу немножко про регламент. Час 30 будет длиться наш вебинар. Час 15 мы отводим именно на сам мастер-класс, 15 минут на вопросы, которые вы можете задавать в чат, да, потом Джастин ответит на более такие достаточно интересные. Также вы можете спрашивать про обучение в школе, на которые администраторы мы ответим. Вот. Если же, допустим, в дальнейшем какие-то будут вопросы также в школе, вы можете обращаться как через сайт, либо через приемную комиссию. Вот. Всем спасибо большое за внимание. Предоставляю слово Джастину.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I just want to say thank you for joining me today, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you. My name is Justin LaRue, director and producer living in Los Angeles. And today I really want to take this opportunity to talk to you about presenting a director's vision. And I think a lot of you may have created some of the things, hopefully today for the newcomers, you get a lot of information in regards to three topics that I really want to talk about is a lookbook, a proof of concept, and a Rip-O-Matic. Those three collectively, I feel, are really the strongest way for us to kind of present our vision for the project that we want to make. And so I know we have limited time, so we'll work through those three topics to give you a sense of how those can help you present your project in the right way to the people that you're going to be presenting it to. And so we'll take about the first hour and 15 to look through those types of materials, and because we have limited time, I'll focus mostly on the highlights. And so hopefully you can take away something that will help you get your next project made. So let's dive in right away since we're looking at time, and we'll start with a director's lookbook. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my director's lookbook for a new project that's in development. And each one of these pieces, the lookbook, the proof of concept, and the Rip-O-Matic, all are tied to one movie called The Riddle Maker. And so I'm going to take this opportunity and share my screen right now with all of you so that we can work through this together, and you'll have a sense of of what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is the lookbook for The Riddle Maker. And just to give you a little foundation of what this project is, this is something I would do with every movie that I would put in development and try to create, would be to create a lookbook and these visual materials for this. And we just finished shooting a project that literally ended post. This is the same kind of work that was done on that project as well. So in this, what you'll see here is really the intro to the project. And in a lookbook, we want it to be as much visual as we possibly can. So in this first part here, really, it's just about giving a sense and a tease to the story. And that's really what will kind of kick us off into the lookbook. And this story, just to give you a little quick synopsis so you understand, it's about a serial killer. It has similarities to an older movie called Seven, if any of you have seen that, or something like Silence of the Lambs. And this is really about a guarded detective and this young forensic psychologist who are trying to stop a serial killer that is tagging victims with nursery rhymes, with children's nursery rhymes. So, you know, in the beginning, we want to have our readers and our viewers of this material, of the lookbook, kind of get a sense of what the story is, what the tone is. And so as we look at this, you know, hopefully this isn't saying it's a romantic comedy, and I'm not sure through the sharing if you can see this well, but you know, it has an image of somebody hanging from a rope. So I hope that for everybody doesn't say that it's a romantic comedy, that it kind of represents that this is dark, that this is a thriller. It has these mystery aspects of crime and solving a case. And so we're kind of diving right into this. And, you know, we want to, as directors, be able to, you know, set up the stage for what this project is. And so once we get an understanding of, you know, the kind of story we're telling, and as a lot of you might notice it, I'm not inundating the person with too much text, right? We have a script that's 120 pages or however long it is that somebody is going to hopefully want to read. Now we live and we work in a visual business. So what's interesting about the movie business is it's very hard to get people to read scripts because people would rather watch movies. So, you know, this is kind of that opportunity for us to provide some information, to excite them about a project, and hopefully get them to say, oh, you know, I like this idea. I want to read more. Okay. And so once we get an understanding of the story, that's going to kind of shift us into more of our creative choices that we're going to make as directors. And so that kind of takes us to what the second page is, which is the tone, right? And the tone in this instance isn't talking about lights and darks and shades, which we'll get to later. This tone is really talking about the mood and the feeling that will be instilled in our audience through the movie. And so if we look at these: deceitful, disturbing, you know, this is a movie hopefully going to bring an audience to the edge of their seat, to connect with the characters and fear for their safety. And so it's really pushing them into this dark space of this crime thriller. Okay, so what I would say about this page is you have to think about what is the feeling that your movie is expressing. And the feeling that you want your movie to express as a director is traditionally the feeling the audience is going to feel when they watch it. And so thinking of a few words here, you know, allows our audience of this lookbook to really ground their feet and to have an understanding of what they can expect from the film. Okay. So this page is not too intense, but I still think it's very important for us to set the mood for it. The next thing that takes us to is our theme. Okay. And it's ultimately important that us as directors, that we direct from a theme. Now, many movies have lots of themes. Audience members in a film sometimes will pull away the theme that they are mostly connected to. But for us as you know, directors, we're really trying to identify the major theme and some sub themes that we will potentially drive this movie direction for. So, you know, this film itself, you'll see, is about justice and how justice works. And, you know, in this instance, we have not to spoil anything, but we have a detective that is hiding a secret from the past where justice wasn't done. And so what does justice mean, not only in society, but what does justice mean to, you know, serving justice here, but I wasn't served justice in the past. So, you know, ultimately you want to identify what you feel is the best theme from your film that is the message, you know, the dramatic question and message that is going to be represented by your movie. And so this is important for somebody because our lookbook is not only used to help our department heads really understand what our vision is. It is used for that and is very strongly used for that. But a lookbook in general is also a super strong asset for us to have in our approach to getting the movie made. Whether it's with distribution, whether it's with actors' agents, financing as well. I mean, somebody can look at our lookbook and get a clear grasp. And these are topics that they can really relate to. You know, someone might really relate to the idea of justice, right? A financier may have had something where this is something that they truly connect with, and they understand why the story is being told, right? And so I traditionally will do a major theme that I'm really directing off of, and then I'll shift to a sub theme, okay? And so, you know, this film has a couple of sub themes. I think most movies will. It's just about determining, us as directors, what our sub theme is, okay? Or potential sub themes are, because like I said, it can be whatever you want it to be. It's all about how we're going to direct the movie and the message that we're going to present in these themes that we're talking about. So I know most of you have thought about themes before. A lot of times when we're writing scripts, obviously we're writing a script with the theme in mind. And what I would say is, once you're finished writing a script, or you have received a script that you're going to direct, really take an opportunity to evaluate that and think, you know, what is the message that I really want everybody to take away from this movie? And what side of the argument am I really confronting? I mean, confronting the past is one thing, but what side of the argument, what side of the theme of that message am I trying to, you know, express to the people who are going to ultimately be watching and hopefully enjoying this movie, despite it being a crime thriller that deals with a serial killer. You know, hopefully there is this angle of enjoyment, whether it's through fear and through scare or through reflection of some of these themes that are being presented, you know, in the film itself. And so, you know, theme is very important for me. And I think that is one way that can represent the project, you know, wholly, right? We have the story, but we also have the theme that's really the ultimate message of what we're trying to present in this thing. And then that kind of brings us to the characters. Okay, so we're not going to read this, but I just want you to understand how important characters are to story, because characters are one way of relating to people, right? When we watch a movie, sometimes we will have a strong correlation to a character trait or the type of relationship that exists in the film. You know, if this were a movie about a father and a son, you know, I definitely could relate in that aspect because I have a father, right? And so being able to create, you know, very extensive characters, three-dimensional characters, and then putting that in here, I believe is a really strong, you know, argument to how people are going to relate to the film, because a lot of times, you know, film and television, characters drive our connection. And we want to ultimately bring people in to understand, you know, who this character is, what is this character's motivation in the film, and ultimately, what are they conflicted about, right? And because having a character who has weaknesses and that has flaws, and is conflicted about things, is ultimately going to make us feel about each one of them. Okay. And I feel like, you know, trying to humanize characters that are on screen is the difference. You know, it's very easy to say, oh, we have somebody who's 25 years old and they're a cop, or a 40-year-old detective, and we leave it at that. But what I intend to do when I'm trying to write these character descriptions, giving somebody a real window into my thought and vision for this, is how would I write a bio for somebody that I love, somebody that I know really well? If I was going to write a biography about my father, or about my mother, or about my sisters, in what kind of depth would I go? That's the kind of depth I really want to go when I'm creating these character breakdowns, because, and this may feel long to some, but we really want to know who they are, all the layers of this person. And the great news about making a movie, there's no right or wrong answers here. We can create whatever kind of character that we want. And so creating strong characters is going to make the choices that they make in the film mean more to our audience. Okay. And so somebody who's viewing this and saying, Justin, you know, I'm considering this film, I really want them to come and read a little bit of this information to give them a backdrop of this story, right? So if we think about what we're going through so far, we're introducing the story a little bit, teasing them. They're going to get a sense of our message and our theme, right, through the film. And now we're taking them into the characters. And so they're going to understand in that story, this is who these individuals are. Okay, so it's kind of, this is going to be the foundation for the entire lookbook. So in the beginning of the lookbook, you'll see there are a little bit more writing than visuals, because we're giving a sense of what this story is in a three-dimensional aspect. And so what I'll traditionally do is I'll traditionally go from one character and then provide a little bit of visual in terms of their style, their clothing, key aspects about them. And so, because this is kind of telling us what type of person there is, combined with what we would have read about who their personality is. And in the section of the writing, I'm really focusing on these aspects. I'm focusing on, you know, obviously their age. What is their occupation as it pertains in the story? If their occupation is important to the story. In this case, a detective is important because it's actually about a serial killer and they're trying to solve a case. But also I really want to focus on, you know, their emotional state of mind when we enter the film. I want to focus on the weaknesses that they may have, because usually if we build in a strong weakness, that weakness is going to play into the character arc of our character, and ultimately they have to overcome this in order to succeed, or they try to overcome it and they don't succeed, which usually ends in a tragedy, right? We have those couple of endings in a film. So that's really what I'm focused on in the writing. And then when I get here, it's like the style of their wardrobe is giving a sense of who they are, kind of tells us a little bit about their class system. It tells us what they think about themselves and how they dress themselves. So in each character situation, this is something that I would do with each character. And as we can see here, I'll do that with our main characters, as you can see here, as we're scrolling through. This lookbook's about 70 pages, so I want to get to the good stuff. Right. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. So we have all of our characters in here. We have a young girl in this as well. And it kind of takes us all the way through all of our characters. Right. And so somebody who reads this, our wardrobe, our costumers, that's really important. But what I realized was over the past few years when I've sent this out, and especially like the last film that we just finished making, I had a director that we were working on attaching, and before they had read the script, they actually looked at the lookbook and they said, I wanted to do the movie based on the lookbook. I trusted that, I could tell that you knew exactly what you wanted, and I had a great sense of who the character was even before I read the script. Like I said earlier, I mean, this is an actor, and even an actor would rather look at a lookbook first than look at a script. So I think this piece can be really used in a whole bunch of different aspects. And in that case, it was really helpful in terms of securing the actor that we wanted, in the film, because they had a great sense of who their character was, the issues their character was dealing with, and they felt like they related to the character, can really provide a great performance on screen. And after we understand the characters, it really kind of takes us to the character arcs, okay? And here's what I would say about the character arc. Traditionally, we have to know the character arc for our protagonist, okay? Our main character is ultimate, and that is going to be what really drives the rest of the lookbook. So in this scenario, this movie almost has kind of a dual protagonist, where Detective Russo is one protagonist and Ashley is a secondary protagonist. But Russo is the most important character in the film. And so what we want to make sure that we are doing here is showing that we have an evolution by our character, because that evolution and how they're feeling in different stages throughout the movie and throughout our story should be what makes and drives our decisions as a director, right? I used to think when I first entered film school, and a lot of you, I know some of you have been in the business for a long time, but if we think back to originally in film school, or our first experience with making movies or films, I used to think, oh, I want to do this shot because it's cool, right? We all look at a shot and we say, oh, visually it's cool. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, how does that shot represent the feeling and the meaning of our character's art? Okay. And so we never want to just randomly choose shots because we think they look good. We want to choose shots because they deliver information about our characters in certain moments throughout the movie. And our character arc is going to give us that explanation as to how does our character evolve or change. It could be in a good way. It could be in a bad way. I mean, in most movies, we do see an arc by our main character. There are some exceptions to that. I mean, if you look at a famous classic movie like Scarface, we almost have a character who gets worse. I guess there is an evolution where they get worse. There is really never, in that movie kind of ends in a tragedy with blazing guns going out, if you've ever seen Scarface. But for the most part, the films that we watch, we see a change in our character, and that change sometimes is for the better and sometimes that's for the worse. But in this scenario, we're seeing, a little writing that's describing our character arc and how they're changing, and trying to represent that with a couple visual images. So hopefully what you're looking at here, you see somebody whose emotional state of mind has changed, right? We see what's kind of indecision on the left and, kind of not sure what's going on, into somebody who ultimately seems to like trying to be overwhelmed with frustration and really determined into, overcoming what they have faced in this scenario. So your character arcs are important in terms of, it's going to be what drives the rest of your lookbook. Okay. So as we scroll through here and we jump, same kind of thing with Ashley, another character. Then it brings us to tonal comps. So what I like to do with our tonal comps is really pick an iconic image from each film, because these movies are going to be what represents us in the 7 visual elements, which I'm going to get to here in a few minutes. But in this scenario, we have Silence of the Lambs. For certain reasons, Silence of the Lambs is a part of this as a comp. Yes, there's a serial killer, a detective dealing with that, but it has the mood and tone and lighting that has similarities. 7 would be another one, as I referenced before. Okay. I usually try to pick 5 movies that I'm then going to use to draw the majority of our images later. Okay. So we see 7. We see the movie Prisoners. Hopefully you can see that. That deals with a kidnapping. We see a movie called The Snowman, which you saw in our character arc. A couple images from The Snowman with Fassbender. And then last but not least, Zodiac. Okay, so I've chosen 5 iconic images with 5 different movies that if somebody looks at this, will get a strong representation of the film and of the style of the film. And then I'm going to utilize these 5 titles through more of the lookbook as we continue. So you'll see a lot of times images drawn with the same characters or from the same movies, because I'm trying to collectively build this world for this movie and have somebody who's looking through this really get a strong understanding of every aspect of this film. Because the lookbook is not just about them understanding what the movie's about. The lookbook is as equal about me trying to prove that I'm the right person to make the film, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're always up against anytime we're going to make a movie, is getting the movie made, right? Getting somebody to believe in us, to believe in the story, because whether you've been in the business for a long period of time or a short period of time, it's always a grind in the process of development and pitching projects and getting things made. And so what we have to really do is provide ourselves with as much ammunition as possible, so that people want to jump on board with us, right? The distributor says, oh, I love it, let's do this thing. A financier says, I love it, let's do this thing. I trust what you are going to do, Justin, right? I think that is a huge aspect in people believing in us. And how do they believe in us? They believe in us by the material that we present to them, and how we present the information and how they understand and comprehend the information. Okay, so I go to the movie comparables, which really brings us into the 7 visual elements. Many of you have probably worked through the 7 visual elements before. This is really the cornerstone of us as directors. And as we look at these 7 visual elements, we'll see we have color, we have tone, space, movement, shape, line, and rhythm. These, like I said, this is the cornerstone of the decisions we're going to make as a director. Okay, and we don't make these decisions simply just based on what we like. We make these decisions based on what type of film do we have, what is the story, what is our character's arc. Okay, because our character's arc is going to make the decision of how our color changes, how our tone is affected. All right, so as we look through these, I want to take a little bit of time on these to really express what this is. It brings us to color first, right? So for me, I'm going to operate on a general spectrum, and within that general spectrum, excuse me, we'll have a light, medium, and a dark, and we will utilize different elements of the spectrum throughout the film, and we'll do so based on the feeling of our character, right? In different situations is when we will be utilizing different moments of this specific spectrum. And as we look through the color, traditionally with these 7 visual elements, us as directors, we tend to direct off of 2 or 3 that dominate our choices, and then the rest of them we have a vision for, and we understand what we're trying to do, but they may not be the biggest priorities, right? So you have to determine within your movie which are the most important 7 visual elements that really drives your director's decisions, and what won't. And so as we look at this, color is one for this film that you'll see throughout this. And just to take a look at this, it says the color choices will be connected to what Russo and Ashley are feeling as they wade through the investigation. Okay. Then it talks about here, the darker shade will be used to give us a sense of the unstable world for both of them. So as the world becomes more unstable, the darker shade of yellow is going to become more prevalent. I could change that. I could say, as the world becomes more unstable, red becomes the color. The great thing about directing is it's all about our choice and our vision, right? And so this lookbook is going to allow us to make those creative decisions that only we can make as the director, right? And if we look at the last little piece here, it says the shades of blue will allow a cold feeling to be present as guilt of the past plagues the characters' lives. So like I said, when our character begins to start feeling something different, it's going to be represented in a color decision, right? And so, and I think that is something that we really have to wrap our heads around. If we understand our character's arc really well, and we understand at what moments in the film are they feeling specific ways, it will really allow us to make these decisions creatively and informed, and ultimately make the best color looking movie that we can, right? Because subconsciously, an audience is going to feel it. Now, and my parents still don't even know what I do. You know, when they think about making a movie, they think I grab a camcorder and you just, you know, hold it up and you shoot it. But it still provides a feeling, right? So it's not about everybody understanding where these decisions came from in our general audience, but these are going to be the decisions that really help us. Okay, so color is one of those, and you'll see I have many different color palettes, and it shows the change in how we're going to use different colors, kind of, you know, represented through an image with a little bit of an explanation. You know, it says here, it will give the yellow will give the world an uglier feel, while the bluish gray heightens the emptiness that remains. Okay, so we'll see this as this changes when we use a lighter spectrum here and how the spectrum, you know, changes there. And then that kind of brings us to tone. Okay, so tone, we had a tone page earlier, which is really the feeling of the film. In this scenario of tone, we're really dealing with lights and darks and light and the lighting of our process. And so here, my tone is really going to be driven by the shadows that we're using. So we're looking at, there's more shadows here, and then shadows start to dissipate. In this scenario, it's kind of the opposite. There are no shadows, but shadows start to overplay the face, right? And so here it says shadows on Russo will be severe at the beginning to represent the secrets and pain he's hiding behind, right? As he starts to open up, the shadows will become less distinct. And then it's the opposite for her, right? Her purity at the beginning has the less shadows, but as she faces more fear and danger approaches her, that's the decision that I'm making to bring in more shadows on this film. So it's up to us, right? You know, we can use shadows however we want to. We can have strong shadows cast on the wall where we see character figures walking because it represents maybe they don't understand really who they are and they're trying to come to terms with something. There are many different ways for us to use shadows, lighting, and the darks, and it's up to us to make that decision. So we have a tone page, as we'll see, and then that brings us into space, right? This really deals with the framing. How do you want to use wide shots, close-ups, extreme close-ups, medium shots, full shots, right? Where do you want the foreground, the background to be? And so I'm going to keep saying this. The decisions are based on your character, right? In the beginning of the film, if your character is feeling one way, that's kind of driving you to the kind of shots that are going to dominate the early part of your movie. And then as conflict and obstacles start to play out in your character, how are you going to represent that change in their emotion, that change in their mental capacity, right? Because when we're facing something and we start to fear or we start to feel lonely, do you want to show loneliness through wide shots as if there's everything around them where the world you know, they seem like they're by themselves, or do you want to show that up close and personal through extreme close-ups? There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It just depends on what is the style of the movie that you're trying to make. So space is really about that framing, and I'll try to utilize different images and give an explanation and talk about the lenses a little bit of what's going to be used in different scenarios here in terms of how the framing will change and how the camera will be used. Okay, so we have a little bit of section about that. And then that brings us to line. Line can be one of the tougher ones. I don't traditionally dominate my directing off of line, but we definitely have discussions with production design departments of are there opportunities for us to, you know, inherently have lines in our film. In this scenario, it's about feeling trapped. So, you know, anywhere we can, we're going to try to use, you know, vertical lines. So our detective feels like they can't get out. They can't solve this case. They can't escape from their past, right? So it plays to our character here, and you'll see a little image from 7, but we get these lines, you know, running up and down the windows here. You can also use lines in a way where you're kind of lining up actors as if you're talking. It can play to the shot designs as well, right? And lines kind of brings us to the next piece, which is shape. How do we use shapes throughout the story? In this scenario, we're going to kind of use squares as a motif of feeling boxed in, okay? And, you know, if I was directing a scene with 4 people, I would probably place them almost in a perfect square. That would make them feel boxed in. If I have set design pieces, we would probably try to set up a living room that has a feel like that it's kind of squared off. If I was using kitchen table, it would be a square kitchen table, not a round kitchen table, because round creates unity. But what I'm going for is the feeling of being trapped, right? Stronger edges and that. So think about what kind of shape that may be a motif throughout your film. It doesn't have to be everywhere. It doesn't have to be in every scene. But these are the elements that we can add that subconsciously will kind of drive everything, okay? So we get through that, and then movement is really about how our characters move. So we want to understand, do our characters' movement change throughout, okay? Do they have better posture? They're walking faster, they're walking slower based on how they're feeling in the moment. Movement continued a little bit. I'm kind of going through this, kind of just trying to highlight the spots so I can get to everything. And then it brings us to rhythm. And rhythm is really driven. What you need to know about this is, how do you want editing to drive the rhythm? Are these quicker cuts? Do you see quicker cuts? Are there certain moments in the film where you're going to have longer shots? They play out. And then also for rhythm, which I think is important, it's not in this one specifically, but many of you can think about, how does music and score play to the rhythm of your film, okay? And so that's really the major components to, you know, to our film in general. Those are the 7 visual elements. And so, like I said, it's really about you crafting your vision through each of these. And if somebody went through this lookbook in detail, and like I said, this could be an entire workshop in terms of just building a lookbook. But if someone went through all of this, they should have a really strong grasp that Justin understands what kind of story he wants to tell. It's like if you gave a script to 3 different directors, they would all create 3 different lookbooks. It might be the same script and the same words on paper, but it would have a very distinct feel, right? And that distinct feel is going to come from what you create here in this lookbook that you're looking at. And then the only other sections that I would have in here, which I'm not going to take you through, is the types of locations that exist, okay? So it just shows you kind of locations and the types of buildings. This movie would shoot in Boston. It gives you a sense and a feel, which adds to the moments of the film. So there is a realistic connection to this being a real place, okay? So as we looked at this lookbook, you know, I think that the great thing about a lookbook is it's up to us, right? We make the decisions and we create, our own vision for the movie, and a lookbook can strongly be used to really reference our style for this. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing right now. I know that was pretty quick to go through a lookbook, but hopefully you were able to grab my intentions, right? You may have your own intentions, and there's many different ways to design a lookbook, right? There's no one right way to design a lookbook, but hopefully some of those elements, what I would say is, the character arc, the 7 visual elements, your theme to your film, those are the building blocks of a lookbook. And that is what really you need to represent for your project, because that's really what's going to make somebody connect. Okay. It's really going to connect with you. So what I want to do next is shift gears for a few minutes and talk about proof of concept, and then I'll show you a little proof, and then I'll jump into Rip-O-Matic as well. And if we get cut short a little bit on time on the Rip-O-Matic, we'll still, you guys, I created a little slideshow that you guys will be able to get afterwards that can kind of have some resources for you in building a Rip-O-Matic. But in terms of proof of concepts, it's a term that's used differently. But ultimately what really we're focused on is in the proof is introducing a piece of our project. So there's the proof of concept that could be a short film, right? And so it's if you've seen, something that's like an actual narrative, beginning, middle, and end, that kind of is a smaller version of your movie. It's something that you shoot to really make your whole narrative kind of come through, but in a condensed way. There's also the form of a proof of concept that many of you might be thinking of making if you've ever seen Whiplash, that is ultimately a couple of scenes that are collectively put together and crafted in a way that feels like they themselves have their own beginning, middle, and end. And it can almost sit as a short film as well, right? And then there's, the teaser version of a proof of concept, which is kind of like making a trailer. You're shooting all these different elements to kind of represent your project, to excite somebody. And then there's a proof of concept that is kind of just an introduction to maybe a character, to a tone, to a style or a theme of your film. And so for The Riddle Maker, what I thought would be important when I shot this proof of concept was I really wanted to introduce the Riddle Maker, which is the evil character, right? And so what I'm going to show you is just that piece. This was shot in one day. What you have to understand is we don't have to always spend thousands and thousands of dollars. So many of you that don't want to spend a lot of money on a proof of concept, there are ways to creatively craft a representation of your movie and shoot it that still provides somebody an exciting look at what you intend to do. So let's take a look right now at this little 2-minute proof of concept. Like I said, it's kind of one scene. It was really one running Steadicam shot for about 2.5 minutes that's cut up, and you'll get a sense of this. But let's take a look at this, and hopefully tech-wise it'll work well. Okay, so this is a Riddle Maker shot one day, and it'll kind of give you a sense of this film.
me! You motherfucker! Who are you?
Call me the Riddle Maker.
What do you want from me?
Riddle me this.
So that was shot in one day. Very small scene, more used as an aspect to introduce this serial killer to some capacity. So like I said, with a proof of concept, hopefully you could see that, this didn't get into the narrative storyline, right? If I was doing a drama and my proof of concept would be much different. It would probably be a collection of a couple of scenes that really identify the character struggles and relationships between the families, right? It kind of depends on what kind of film that you're intending on making. And so with this, I felt like what would be the strongest would be with the collection of material that I'm going to have a lookbook that's going to really dive into my vision for the film. They're going to get some story aspects out of that as well. They're going to know my characters very well. This kind of the introduction of the evil character was what I felt like was most important for this process. And then combine those two elements with making a rip-o-matic, which is the next thing that I want to go to. And so a rip-o-matic is really what you should think about in a rip-o-matic is like, you're creating a trailer, but you're creating a trailer from ripped footage. Okay, so I will say this. I think a rip-o-matic is one of the hardest things absolutely to create because you're not shooting really anything. I mean, sometimes you'll rip footage and you'll have a little bit of your own footage that you'll kind of piece in, but think about when you're making a trailer, think about all the cuts and all the aspects of that. And you're trying to create one narrative by making a trailer with 20, 30, 40 different films, pulling the footage, creating your own sound design, and still trying not to confuse an audience based on the different kinds of actors. So that's really the biggest challenge when we create a rip-o-matic. So I'm going to show you the rip-o-matic, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the aspects and the elements, because for anybody who doesn't yet know what a rip-o-matic is, I want you to see it first, and then we'll take some minutes and really talk about it. Okay. Hang on one second. You will see some familiar faces in this because, like I said, we are grabbing footage from other movies. So you might see Brad Pitt. I mean, why not go with Brad Pitt? Pretty big star to give a sense of your film. So Brad Pitt is in this as well as some others. So this is a form of a rip-o-matic for that same movie that we're dealing with a serial killer. So here we go.
A woman vanished last night. We just found the body.
Prince?
He's completely insane. The only thing we know for sure is that he's playing games with us. Be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with. He's been watching us the whole time. He's taunting us. If we don't find him, this is never going to stop.
another missing moment.
There's something we're not seeing.
Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
Okay, so that was a Rip-O-Matic. Just to give you a little explanation of that, I used about 25 movies to pull all of that footage from. I tried to identify a main character and only use a couple different people. And if I had to use, like Brad Pitt, obviously you saw, Michael Fassbender's in there. It's kind of playing to the same character as this lead detective. And then in the end, you saw I did pull a piece from what I had shot. It's kind of that same character. So in a Rip-O-Matic, they're commonly used here. They're used because, first of all, you can create a scale to a movie that you can't create shooting a proof of concept, right? There's no way I can shoot all of those elements that you saw in that Rip-O-Matic in a couple of days in a proof of concept, right? So I can't represent the scale and size. If I'm going out asking somebody for 10 or $20 million, I can't represent that in a proof, but I can represent that in a Rip-O-Matic. So the combination of the two is a real asset for us to have. And the process is, you know, it's tough. Like, we want to create it like a trailer. And we want to be able to have these different elements, you know, that really heighten and excite the tension. If you saw that there was voiceover, so I cut up different voiceovers from Michael Fassbender and put it on this as the voice of the film. And then I used about 25 other films to tap into the different images. And my main goal with this was the tone, introducing the serial killer, providing scale that is representative for the amount of money that this movie is going to take to make, right? So you see the big car crash, you see some of the gunshots, the running, the action, these kinds of elements. And also, you know, what I really wanted to be able to do, which was the hardest piece for me, and I really couldn't get it done in the image itself, was the whole nursery rhyme scenario, right? Tagging victims with nursery rhymes. There's not been really a movie where anybody's tagged with nursery rhymes in terms of the scene stage like this. But so I used the nursery rhyme at the very end with the credits to kind of give it that sense. And that was one of the best ways that I could represent that in this Rip-O-Matic. So this, in my opinion, is just a huge aspect in terms of presenting our vision and having them understand, you know, the scale of our project, what we intend to do throughout. So as we look at, you know, this Rip-O-Matic, it's, can we create a narrative through? You can also use title cards and things like that. And so I know I have a few minutes left before we jump into Q&A. Time goes really fast, by the way. We needed a few hours, but let me show you just this little PowerPoint I just threw together for this on Rip-O-Matics, which is something you will all get because it has some resources for you. But let's take a look at this, just a few slides that I think might do some good. So just in terms of the Rip-O-Matic, so if we think about what is a Rip-O-Matic and its purpose, collection of shot footage compiled, right, which is what you saw in this example. Like I said, I used about 25 movies. Sometimes it was one shot from one movie. But what I need to do is figure out what is my narrative that I want to tell, okay, throughout. And then I have to try to find my structure of what kind of images that I want to put. The beauty of making an action film or a thriller or a horror film or something like that, in the middle section, it's always about driving the intensity, right? So you're picking these big set piece action moments and cutting them together. So, you know, it feels like you're raising the tension for everybody. If it's in a drama and it's more about the emotional impact that something has on somebody, you're going to have to find those moments where we see the heartbreak happening, where we feel all hope is lost for the character, where we don't think they might succeed, right? So really these images that would, or these clips that would represent, you know, that emotional turmoil, right? So like it says, it's a narrative trailer-like composition. So as you know, hopefully that looked somewhat like a trailer, right? You can use title cards. In this one, I used voiceover. You can use a mixture of both. And it depends on, you know, really what kind of story you have, whether you want to use title cards or voiceover or both. You also can kind of introduce the themes through those title cards in some instances, right? It's the dramatic question. What is our character up against, right? In this, the voice says, you know, he says, we have another missing girl, and we're basically, ultimately, he's never going to stop, and we're never going to stop him, right? There's this question, right, of can we do this? And that could be done through a title card. But this whole piece should represent your vision, from, you know, the style of it, the cutting of it, the intensity of it, the tone, the mood. And like I said, it creates a comparable scale. And who do you show this to? I have about 3 minutes left. Investors, distribution companies, production companies, sales agents, agents of talent, film financing companies. I mean, this can be used a lot and is a common practice here in Hollywood. So if you haven't done a Rip-O-Matic, in my opinion, it's one of the most valuable pieces in terms of helping you get a movie made, right? You combine that with a proof of concept and a lookbook. I mean, this is the best bet you have, right? It shows your complete outlook for your movie. And then they read the script, they love the script, and hopefully they give you the resources that you need ultimately to make your film. But also here, I put this trailer-like structure up. This is a structure you can follow in terms of when you start editing and cutting through together. I won't take us through every piece of this, but, you know, obviously we want to establish what this is, right? We want to set up what the character's goal is, and then what is this character facing? In this scenario, what the goal is to stop a serial killer. We introduce that there's a girl that is killed, right? And that this character has to stop it. And then the conflict, what is facing against them in that Rip-O-Matic is he's playing games with us. It's actually said in the voiceover, right? So you're going to have this to go through. This is something I would follow loosely, but this is something I think that can really help you if you intend on doing it. And then here's a few resources for you to use. A couple things. This sample structure video, it's on YouTube. It's great. Definitely check it out after we get done today. I think it will be a really clear example of what you're doing. So what's interesting about that is it shows a black screen, but it shows kind of the sounds, and it tells you in each moment what for you to put to build this kind of trailer Rip-O-Matic. There's a place for sources of footage that you can rip off, you know, that you can rip down. It's used best if you're using trailers because of the sound. You need to be able to get ripped footage that has 5.1 surround sound, because then that will give you the opportunity to separate it. And then there's a link to how to clean the dialogue and a little link about music if you want some of that. So guys, it was a pleasure to talk to you. So now we've got a little bit of time left. 15 minutes, they said, for any questions you might have. So yeah, here, let's open it up for some questions. Hopefully some of that information was useful. I know I sped through a lot of it. I wanted to try to give you as much content as I possibly could in the hour 15. But yeah, so it was, hopefully some of that can help you guys as you venture out to make your next movies. So yeah. Any questions? Right. No, you can just. Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. So We're not using, oh, okay. You're good, okay. No, we usually pull down images from the internet. We're not buying those images. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're not utilizing them in public for public exposition. We're only utilizing those privately as we share our concepts with people directly. Yeah, so there is no one length for a lookbook. I've done lookbooks 40, 50 pages, and I've seen lookbooks. I have a friend who did one that was 140 pages. A lot deals with the amount of locations that really add the number of pages. That's one aspect. And then in terms of design, no, any design is acceptable. I've also done it where you use a private hidden website and you create the website that ultimately is like a journey through a lookbook. I think that's a very positive way, but any software where you can visually create something that tells your vision is acceptable. It's a good question. Traditionally, I move into a lookbook the second I have a draft of the script or a script that's far enough along that would be presentable to share with actual companies. So yeah, this is where we get into the whole writer director scenario. It is two completely different aspects. So if there's any screenwriters out there, I'm sorry about this, but the minute the screenwriter writes the script and passes it on to a director, the movie becomes the director's movie. And so the lookbook is solely the director's 100%. In terms of that. And I know I write as well. So I know that's kind of tough sometimes, but ultimately the script is one thing. And now when we're creating the visual, that is solely the vision of the director. And so the script will go through changes and that's based on what the director's decision is, as it is theirs from that point forward. So in that aspect, I mean, we obviously want to try to stay with what we see from the writer as much as possible. But our job as a director is for us ourselves, when we consume the script, to find the theme that we connect with the most, right? That's how we're going to make the best film. The writer may have had a different theme in mind, but what are we connecting with that is really going to drive us as a director make the film? So I am a writer, director, and producer. In fact, some of you met my producing partner maybe last week or maybe earlier this week on Monday, Lydia Cedrone. And that's an interesting question. Lookbook traditionally, no. The producer's job is to facilitate a director's vision. And part of the reason a producer hires a director is because they believe in that director to provide the vision for that film, right? The way we get around that as directors is if we're also producers. And so, on this last film that I made, I produced it with Lydia, but I also wrote it and directed it. So that's why we see Steven Spielberg's name as an executive producer on a lot of projects. So nobody really can alter that vision for him. Sure. So the best scenario with how we think about lines is there any type of construction, not construction literally, but is when we look at an image, do objects collectively create, vertical or horizontal lines, and do those lines represent something? Also, the lines could be jagged. They don't have to be clear-cut lines. And it's kind of something that would be, a subconscious feeling that when we're filming, we have these clean type lines that run across or run vertical, and they represent something in the film subconsciously. Oh, well, tell them it was a pleasure. It was obviously a pleasure to be here. And I don't know there might be one person here, there might be 20 here, I don't know, but it was a pleasure, whoever is here, and hopefully I wish them all the best of luck as they, progress in their careers and they look to really get as many movies made as they can. No, 100% based on the director and what the director feels. Back historically, we always had the understanding that, for example, that, yellow could only mean a warm feeling, right? But based on our choices, we've learned over time that, yeah, colors do have a tendency to have a representation of feeling in terms of people. But what we've also realized is when we use a color with a specific style and feeling in a film, and different contrasts of that color, right? It will take on its own life, and people will not even realize, but they're relating to that kind of color with that emotion that you want them to. So it's up to the author to represent what each color really means for them in their film. So that's what I would do. Yes, this is now that is what's going to happen with what they just saw today, but with former movies in the past, that is exactly what happened. So this one is what I want to make next. And yes, this will all be used in that presentation, in combination with a pitch and probably a business plan as well. Yeah, I would say, it's kind of depends in terms of sound in general. I mean, yeah, you can use sometimes we have dialogue in Rip-O-Matics. It's more than fine to use. But in terms of voiceover, that's really the thing where normally ADRing or recording your own voiceover so it does get the message across. In this one that I just showed, luckily I found enough of Michael Fassbender saying and cutting up, because I liked that tone of his voice, that I didn't actually have to go back and re-record, which was my original intention. But because it worked so well, I left it as is. Huh. If you ask my partner right away, no. Usually we have to know the budget the minute the script structure is locked. So the budget of the film is going to inform all the rest of our material, in terms of, it's going to inform our pitch, it's going to inform our business plan. So the minute our script is in position where there's not going to be any changes that are going to change the scale of the movie, we at Tidal Wave would budget it right away. So we have a clear picture that how much money is it going to take to make this film about, right? And then we can go work through the other aspects. My opinion, if the ultimate goal is to make your first feature, right? Your first feature is always going to be your first feature. It's definitely make these materials, but what you can do, because a Rip-O-Matic is free, a lookbook is free. That's just work and effort. But as we talk about a proof of concept, what you might consider doing is making that short film, right? But making that short film that is a piece of the feature. So now you've done two things. You've made a short film that you could send to festivals, you could represent yourself as a director with, but you've also have something that is representative of a bigger piece, right? And so you could use that also when you go to find investors or financiers to earn the funding. I'm a believer that if we want to make movies, whatever we're creating needs to be helping push that movie forward or those movies forward. So I think you could kill two birds with one stone with make the short film, but the short film is representative of that feature that you want to make. Well, okay, I'm not an editor, but that Rip-O-Matic I cut. And I figured it out, how to do that, and it cost $0. So a regular editor would be, if you wanted to hire somebody to work with, what I would suggest is that you yourself as the director identify what clips from all what movies is going to tell you that, because the structure and the story of what we're telling in the Rip-O-Matic needs to be from the director, right? Now, who actually puts it together, that can be an editor. I have editor friends here who they could throw together a Rip-O-Matic if I told them exactly what clips and showed them exactly what clips were going together. And then you could bring in somebody to do sound if you wanted to. I mean, I definitely wouldn't spend more than US wise, you know, a couple $1,000, maybe $1,000 if you're going to do a Rip-O-Matic, because I feel like there's so much of it that we can manage ourselves, you know, while we're sitting on the couch. I think that number one, you have to represent your project collectively. So when I show a Rip-O-Matic, I also show a business plan. And in my business plan, it will show the targeted level of cast. And I think that you have to be very forthcoming to represent what scale of movie are you making. And so when you're having those conversations, it's about, here's who I'm intending to cast. Here is a Rip-O-Matic that kind of shows the scale of the film and the action and the narrative. So we're not really pinning on that it's going to be Brad Pitt, right? Now, I've seen Rip-O-Matics before that actually introduce a big character's name, and that is if that is who they're intending to go after. But I think the combination of a business plan that really shows you who you're intending to cast in connection with a Rip-O-Matic is valuable. So then you're completely transparent with investors to say, look, it's a $5 million movie. It's not going to be Brad Pitt. Here's the cast that we're honestly thinking of casting. But this is the representation of the story. Okay. That's great. I'm glad. Hopefully everyone enjoyed, and, you know, look forward to seeing what any of you make, you know, in the future. Hopefully you guys get some films made.
Еще раз, Джастину, спасибо большое, это было очень круто. Сэм, спасибо еще раз за перевод. Как обычно, ты нас радуешь как бы достаточно быстрыми и качественными своими речами. Вот. Для тех, кто досмотрел до конца мастер-класс, для нас у школы, кто хочет обучаться как бы киноиндустрии, приготовлены скидки на первый семестр, вообще приготовлены скидки как бы на общие программы, и это все обговаривается. Вот. Ну, еще раз спасибо всем участникам за мастер-класс. Это было очень познавательно и очень круто. Вот. Ну, и также присоединяйтесь каждую пятницу к нашим вебинарам. Вот. Всем хорошего вечера, хорошего настроения и хороших выходных.